Okay, so red cards. Starting with Arnie Broken Brow. So 3 mana 3/3 haste. I'm already on board. This card looks solid. It's a rare, so that makes sense. 3 mana 3/3 haste, and he's got Boast 1. You may change Arnie Broken Brow's base power to 1 plus the greatest power among other creatures you control. So basically, just trying to think yeah, I mean basically he can attack as, let's see, you've got a 4 mana, you got a 4/2 on the battlefield, along with Arnie. So for 1 mana, you basically get to attack with Arnie as though he's a 5/3, because it's 1 plus the 4, which is the largest otherwise. Kind of an interesting ability. It's real aggressive. Like, that's literally all this dude wants to do is just attack. Attack, attack, attack. And that's not terrible, honestly. And again, he's like a 3 mana 3/3 haste. I can see this being a role player in actual constructed. Like, I think standard red might play this. It's probably a decent addition to most red aggressive brawl decks. I don't see this making the jump to EDH. I think the ability is just too boring to make it work in EDH, especially in a multiplayer format. But and then in limited, it's just a solid, 3 mana 3/3 haste, which is like, if you want that, you want that. That's good. So that's a pretty cool card. X-Guard Cavalry wins the award for, I think, probably the coolest, most ridiculous art in this set. Just like utter nonsense, explosion, goat riding silliness. It makes me think a lot of WoW just because of the goat mounts, which is funny. So it's a 2 mana 2/2, and then it can also tap to gain haste. Sorry, it can tap to give another creature haste on turn. Tapping to gain haste would be a very bad set of abilities, I will say. But yeah, so target creature gains haste until end of turn, and otherwise it's 2 mana 2/2. Totally fine, totally serviceable. You'll play this in most of your red aggressive decks. Basalt Ravager is this is our sort of wannabe Flametongue Kavu. So this is a 4 mana 4/2, which is of course the quintessential Flametongue Kavu stats. When it enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to any target, including opponents, notably, which is something Kavu cannot do, where X is the greatest number of creatures you control that have a type in common. So again, we know that giant wizard tribal is, or at least like giant tribal, and a lot of them are wizards in blue-red, is a thing. This is basically going to be more or less frequently checking the number of wizards and or giants that you have, and then dealing damage to something equal to that number. I do think this card is quite solid. Again, it's like a few cards are going to hold a candle to the original Flametongue Kavu that's just a 4 mana 4/2 deal 4 to a creature all the time. Zero variability there. But this is not a bad imitation of that, and it's probably pretty solid and limited, I would say. It's obviously going to depend on how many creatures you can have in play. The biggest thing I have against this is it's kind of win more, where like if you have like 3 other giants in play, like you're probably already winning the game, and dealing 4 to something isn't going to be that necessary, which is why I'm a little contentious on this, but it is a reasonable ability, even if you're just pinging something for like 2. Breakneck Berserker is just a 3 mana 3/2 haste, so it's just like this, but worse. But it's fine. Again, if you are playing red aggressive, this is probably going to be okay. It will trade for a lot of like smaller creatures a lot of the time, but it's fine. Calamity Bearer is a rare, so this is a 4 mana 3/4 that says if a giant source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to a permanent or player instead. So at its base, this creature attacks functionally as a 6/4. This creature is essentially a 4 mana 6/4 for 4, which is like very good. Like, this card is ridiculous just on that merit alone. It is a 4 mana 6/4 creature. Like, that is some real stats. So I'm a fan of that. I will say that I play a Xenagos EDH deck, and I was very sad because the type line giant means that it obviously really restricts what actually gets doubled. Initially, I just thought it was if a source you control would deal damage, I could just act it as another version of like Furnace of Wrath or Angrath's Marauders or whatever, which would be absurd. So obviously you want this to be in your giant tribal deck. Like, this is not going to go into every red deck, but I think that's also okay that like giant tribal gets this really cool card, but it doesn't go in every other deck. But yeah, in limited, this card is nuts. You need to stop saying that word. This card is absurd in limited. But in terms and it's probably decent in Brawl if people are building some sort of giant tribal Brawl deck. I think that's probably cool. And then EDH, again, it just depends. If you're playing a giant tribal in EDH, this is probably decent in there. It is a very powerful effect if you're consistently putting a bunch of giants on the battlefield, but it's really only good in the giants deck. So again, very, very niche, but powerful in that niche. Cinderheart Giants, 7 mana, 7/6 trample. I mean, it costs a lot, but it's pretty powerful. Like that's a big body. And it tramples too, so like it's hard to block. And then when it dies, it deals 7 to a creature an opponent controls chosen at random. That one's kind of weird. Like 7 is a lot, and it's kind of funny because it just randomly deals 7 to like this lowly little 1/1 or whatever. But it also could take out a potentially very large creature. Again, if you're playing Giant Tribal, you might want one of these at the top of your curve, but you definitely don't want multiples of this. It is still a 7-drop. You really don't want to be filling your deck with 7 drops. Craven Hulk. I actually love this card. The flavor is great. Incidentally, if nobody's sure, this is the head, this is its eyes, and these are its hands. And it's like peeking out from behind the rock, asking its little goat friend if it's safe to come out yet. So abandoned at birth, this giant was raised by goats. Ironically, it grew up to be the most cautious member of the herd. So this is basically a giant that doesn't know it's a giant. It just thinks it's a goat, and it's kind of a fraidy cat. But it's still a giant, so it's still very big. Well, relatively big anyway. Can't block alone, but notably it can still attack alone. So if you're getting aggressive, it can attack as a 4/4 all by itself, no problem. The only thing is if you're on the defensive, it may be a 4/4, but it can't block worth crap. At least not unless they have something else. So you gotta be careful, because like if you were planning on blocking and you had this plus 1 creature, and then they use 1 removal spell, suddenly you have no blockers, even though you technically have 2 bodies. Next is Crush the Weak. 3 mana sorcery, deals 2 damage to each creature, and if it would die, if a creature dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. So basically anything. So basically exile. Basically all creatures with toughness 2 or less are just going to get exiled by after this happens, and you can foretell it, and the foretell cost is 1. It's versatile. It's only a pyroclasm at the end of the day. They're not always good. But if you're playing against an opponent playing a bunch of weenies, like just like small X1s and X2s and everything, this could be pretty good. This to me screams sideboard card, but it is a potentially very powerful sideboard card. All right, then we had Demon Bolt. Solid common removal spell. Probably the best red common if I were to take a guess, although I'll happily update that if that's not the case. But so far it's easily the best red common by quite a bit. 3 mana instant, deal 4 to a creature or walker. We're noticing a trend of common spells being able to interact with planeswalkers, which I think is a good thing, because it means the planeswalkers aren't quite as backbreaking when they resolve. Like you don't just insta-lose to them the way you used to back in the day when like only other rares and mythics could deal with planeswalkers. But then notably again, you can foretell this for 1 red. So, and if you're doing this for 1 red mana, then that's quite good. I think this is a very, very good card and a very high pick. Well, probably not Bite your Ugin, because Ugin also just comes in with an obscene amount of loyalty, and 4 damage is it'll help, but Ugin doesn't care about taking 4, unfortunately. That card is real gross, as we all know, I'm sure. Alright, Doomscar Titan. 6 mana for a 4/4. It has foretell 5. When it enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. So notably, it does grant itself haste. So although it doesn't say haste, it does give itself haste, so don't forget that you can attack with this too if you cast it. The giant cards are really funny. I mean, they're obviously very Timmy cards. They're like, yes, do all the cool, big, splashy things. You obviously got to be careful, because if you just fill your deck full of 6 drops, you're going to lose most of the games you play, because your opponent's going to kill you with like 2 drops and 4 drops. But they do have some pretty splashy effects. I will not deny that. So Doomscar Titan enters the battlefield. Right, so it gets +1/+0 and gains haste. So it basically acts as like this like sort of like miniature Anthem style effect, and it's very aggressive. And it's also a 5/4 haste for either 6 or 5 mana on the turn you cast it, along with, bolstering all your other things in the same time. So a good little finisher card. Again, a nice little curve topper for a red aggressive deck. I would definitely not want to play more than 1, as I've said with most of these expensive cards. But it is a good way to finish a game kind of out of nowhere, right? Because it's like, this puts by itself 5 power haste on the battlefield, and if you've got like a few other like 2/2s and 3/2s on the battlefield, this is putting several more points of power onto the battlefield with haste, which is pretty good. Okay, we get Dragonkin Berserker. I think this is probably the best boast card in the set from what I've seen. So it's a 2-mana 2/2 first strike. That's already just a very good card. This is going to see play in all of the red aggressive decks in standard, I believe. And then it has boast abilities. You activate cost 1 less to activate for each dragon you control. So that's a bit of a weird restriction. Obviously, we're not going to be controlling that many dragons. However, it does have its own boast ability, of course, which costs 5. It's the most expensive boast by a lot, but with good reason, because for 5 mana, you get to make a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying, and that's just a permanent token. You just keep that. And then obviously, you're not really going to get to the point where this ever costs a single red, because if you control 4 dragons, which is like in order to cheapen that, you've certainly already won the game if you haven't won on Earth has happened in this match. But it's still a very powerful ability. It's just a solid, like, a 2-mana 2/2 first strike is just a decent card on its own in a red aggressive deck. And the fact that you can just also in the later game just convert it into a 5/5 red dragon. Like, there's honestly a lot of scenarios where I'd be pretty happy. Like, if my opponent had a 4/4, I would just attack this into their 4/4. Like, sure, they're going to block it and kill it, but I'm just going to get a 5/5 dragon out of that. Like, and that's like a fine deal. So like, yeah, I like this card a lot. I don't think definitely has brawl applications. Again, if you're playing a Torbrand deck or anything like that, this will be great in your Torbrand deck. The red aggressive brawl decks are not really my cup of tea. They're pretty linear and boring, but this is a good card in that deck. I don't think this will see a lot of play in Commander. It just doesn't do enough. It's like we all know, aggressive strategies just don't really work in Commander, so we're gonna move on. Dual Strike. So 2-mana instant. Whenever you cast your next instant or sorcery spell with converted mana cost 4 or less this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this is obviously just a worse fork, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to make sure I remember what fork does. Yeah, so fork is literally just 2 mana, copy target or instant or sorcery spell, and then you may choose new targets. So this is basically fork, except that it has the cap of only being able to do something 4 or less. So you can't you can't copy anything like truly ridiculous, like a Sublime Epiphany or something. So it's gonna like put a cap on how good it can be, but it's still a pretty strong card. I've heard people talking about Neobrand combo, or not Neobrand, but Neoform combo in Historic, but I don't know or care about that. And again, it does foretell for 1, so it can slide in nicely cheap. Cap? Yeah, maybe. I might have to clip that or something. That's funny. I think this card has interesting build around potential. Like, it's a very cool cog piece in the machine. And I definitely think this could actually see EDH potential as well, for sure. There are a lot of cool things you can copy, even when the limit is 4 or less. But realistically, you're always gonna play Fork in EDH before you play this. But as a second copy of Fork, this card might be very reasonable, if that's what you're in the market for. Dwarven Hammer is, of course, our red tribal equipment. This is your sort of overcosted, but you get a benefit thing. So it's 3 mana to cast, and it gives +3/+0 and trample. That actually is one of the better sort of equip costs or like benefits of being equipped that I've seen so far. But it does equip for 3, which is not nothing. Like, again, I hate to do this. I mean, and obviously this is more for EDH purposes, but this is a card. This is 3 colorless mana with 3 equip. Creature gets +3/+0, has trample, and lifelink. So this is just this is never going to see play in EDH. We can already just pretty much count this out. This card is decent, but not amazing. In terms of Brawl, there are not that many good equipments in Brawl. I recently tried building a Nahiri deck in Brawl, and found out the hard way that there are like 3 good equipments, and this might actually make the cut in that deck if you're really trying, because it is one of the better ones of what the standard card pool is currently offering, believe it or not. And of course, like I said, you can pay the extra 2 in order to create a 2/1 red dwarf creature. This actually, it basically winds up coming in equipped as a 5/3 or a 5/1 trample. Yeah, you were there, Project. You remember that? Yeah, that was your idea, if I recall. Oh, not the commander, but the exercise was your idea. Again, I think that deck might get more real. There are a lot of warriors and equipments in this set, but man, is that deck bad right now. We'll have to see what Kaldheim does, like when I actually take a look at it. Anyway, moving on. Dwarven Reinforcements, 4 mana, make 2 2/1 red dwarves, and you can foretell it for 2. Fine. If you're going wide, it's not bad. It's like, 2 bodies for 4 mana, 4 power. It's okay. I'm not excited about it, but there's probably decks that are interested in it. Fearless Liberator, honestly, it does look pretty solid to me. It's a 2 mana 2/1, and its boast ability is for 3 mana make more 2/1s. All of these 3 cards actually make a bunch of dwarves, which I think is kind of funny. I think this card is fine. If you're playing red aggressive in Commander or in Limited, you're definitely gonna do this. I don't think it's incredible or anything, but you'll probably always play it if you're red aggressive in Limited. Fearless Pup. Other than winning the Goodest Boy award for the set, certainly. It's a 1 mana 1/1 first strike, and it has boast, get +2/+0 until end of turn. You're actually decently likely to play this if there's a really low to the ground like red-white aggressive boast deck. This actually probably will be a decent role player in that deck, I suspect. It does obviously get outclassed pretty quickly, but that doesn't make it bad. Alright. It's okay. And it's very cute, admittedly. I need to get some water. I'll have to do that on my next break. Frenzied Raider. 2 mana for a 2/2. And whenever you activate a boast ability, put a 1/1 counter on it. So again, this is a boast payoff. This is what we call like a build around uncommon, where basically it's good in a very specific deck. How good will depend on how good the boast deck is. But if you are playing the boast deck, I assume you'll want as many of these as you can get your hands on. And that's all I have to say about that one. Frostbite. 1 red for a snow instant. Frostbite deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker, but if I control 3 or more snow permanents, it deals 3 damage instead. Notably against no permanents, but it does say snow permanents, so this is one that doesn't care about just lands. This works with any kind of snow permanent, which makes it better for sure. So this card is great, first and foremost. Like, it's a shock. It's always at least a shock. Now, it's the shock that can't go face, which is a cost, but it's fine. And then you can build around this reasonably easily, I would expect, to be able to get to the 3 damage if you wanted to. If this is not Scred, this is not, but it is still a totally serviceable removal spell in red. Goldspan Dragon. Alright. We found our dragon for the set. I believe this is actually the only dragon in the set, at least as a card. There's the other one we saw earlier that makes dragon tokens, but I think this is the only one that actually is a dragon. It's very good. There's no doubt about it. It's a 5 mana 4/4 flying haste. Like, I'm already sold. I'll play that card every time. Whenever it attacks or becomes the target of a spell, you make a treasure token. So treasure tokens, if you don't know, are an artifact that you tap and sack to create 1 mana of any color you want. But notably, it also has the passive ability of treasure you control, have sacked this artifact, add 2 mana of any one color. So it actually, while this card is out, it actually doubles how effective each individual treasure token is, which is really, really strong. And if anyone's played EDH, they know that the card Smothering Tithe is a real thing. And this card is a combo with the card Smothering Tithe, let me tell you what, because that is going to generate just piles of mana if it's allowed to happen. Notably, also, if you are playing this in a red-blue deck, and your opponent goes to target it with a spell, it will, in response, generate a token that will then tap for blue. And if you are playing blue and you have a negate or a counterspell or something up, you can actually use the very token generated by getting targeted in order to cast up to a 2 mana counterspell to prevent it from dying in the first place. So it's like not quite self-protecting, but it like gives you pretty much 2 mana in order to defend it with, even if you had to because even if you play this on turn 5, right, you have to tap out to play this, it'll still essentially give you 2 mana in addition that you can still use to protect it, which I think is really cool. This card will definitely see play in Brawl, I believe. It might see play in Standard, that I don't know. Obviously, we're playing this in Limited. Windmill slam this every time. This is probably the best red card that we've looked at so far. And then like again, I think in EDH it has some real potential because there are a lot of good cards that generate treasure in EDH, notably Dockside Extortionist, Smothering Tithe, there's Brass's Bounty, things like that. Lots of things that make treasure. It's good with Treasure Map as well. Lots of things in EDH make treasure, and this card just kind of turbo boosts that. It won't be at home in every single red deck or anything like that, which again I think is a good thing. But if you're in a red deck and your red deck is making treasure, this is probably a place you want to look. It's great. Actually, yeah, there's a card we haven't seen yet, but I'll harken back to that in a second. All right, Hoggy Mob, 5 mana for a 5/4 with Boast 2. When it attacks, it deals 1 damage to any target. I actually think this is a very good common. A 5 mana 5/4 attacks quite well. Doesn't risk trading with too much. And the relatively cheap Boast ability of pinging things out of the way means that, like, if your opponent has, like, a 3/3 and a 1/1 and they're at 8, right? They're gonna want to try to chump block with the 1/1, keep their 3/3 around to try to get you down. But you actually get to kill that 1/1 or the X1 out of the way, and then they're forced to, like, either take 5 and go to 3 or block with their much larger, better creature to save that damage. So the fact that it's, like, more or less has a built-in way to clear chump blockers out of the way, I think is actually a really cool card. Especially as a common, I think this is, like, a reasonably strong common. You're not going to want to run many, 1, maybe 2, but it is a good card. It is a good card, I think, in terms of, like, the red commons. Okay, Immersturm Raider. This is a 2 mana 2/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card, and if you do, draw a card. So this one rummages. It's a fine card. It's a good little, it's a decent little body. Like, it's a pretty, like, innocuous body at the end of the day, but it's a 2 mana 2/1. That's about right for the stats. And then if you have, like, kept, like, a land, like a draw where you've kind of started flooding out a little bit, you can just pitch a random land and try to get a better card out of it. So, like, you'll probably play it more often than not, but it's not exciting. All right, Magna Brazen Outlaw. I don't know, she wasn't that far below. So Magna Brazen Outlaw is a 2 mana 2/1 and grants other dwarves +1/+0. So notably, they get more aggressive but not more tough. Whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, make a treasure token. So basically, and that includes her. So basically, every time you attack with a dwarf or tap it for some other reason, you get to create a bunch of treasure tokens. So they kind of, like, generate mana for you. And then you can sack 5 treasures, search your library for an artifact or dragon card, put that card directly onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. So this is the ability that people are hype about, because, again, if you're doing, it doesn't care where the treasures came from. So again, if you've just played Dockside Distortionist, or you had a Smothering Tithe going for a while, you can just pay 2 mana and then immediately sack 5 treasures that you already had from earlier, and then just go get any artifact or any dragon. And, like, there are probably a lot of really dumb, like, I haven't really thought this through super hard, but there are probably a lot of really dumb artifacts and or dragons that will do really gross things if you can just pull them out of your deck for free, like, kind of at will. So this card is definitely powerful, has been getting a lot of buzz as a result. Notably, it's a sick combo with this Goldspan Dragon, because all the treasures you have then tap for, like, more, and you get to do even more cool things, so that's pretty cool. Next we have Open the Omen Paths. I mean, yeah, again, in terms of EDH, I think that she is definitely powerful enough to see play in EDH, just on the merit of her last ability. The downside is you are forced to play a bunch of dwarves to really cash in, although there are ways to get treasures that are not just dwarves, obviously. Because the problem is there are a lot of very bad dwarves. And, like, not a lot of good dwarves. So, like, that is a deck building constraint, but the payoff is real, is very real. So if the payoff, if the setup cost isn't too much, then the payoff is worth it, then that'll be a real deck. I don't know about Brawl, because I legit don't know how many good decks, like, dwarves are in Brawl. Like, I guess you can literally play 7 dwarves, and you can play 7 of the 7 dwarves, so, like, that's a lot of your dwarf mileage covered right there, I suppose. So maybe that's actually just, like, a funny meme deck in and of itself. We'll just build a Magna Brazen Outlaw 7 dwarves deck and see what happens. Because there were quite a few dwarves in Eldraine that she can probably take advantage of, in addition to the ones that are in this set. Okay, Open the Omen Paths, 3 mana instant, choose 1, add 2 mana of any one color, and 2 mana of any other color. So for 3 mana, you make 4 mana, and it's 2 and 2 of something. But you can only spend as the cat's creatures or enchantment spells. So you do get 4 mana out of 3 mana, it's a ritual, but it has a limited number of things it can be applied to. Alternatively, for 3 mana, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. I'm pretty sure this is not a good card. I wouldn't play this in any of my decks. This just doesn't look that good. Like, rituals aren't good. This ability for 3 mana is not good. Don't play this card. This card's bad. Provoke the Trolls. 4 mana instant. Provoke the Trolls deals 3 damage to any target. If a creature was dealt damage this way, it gets +5/+0 until end of turn. So this card's interesting because you can use it in a couple of ways, right? You can just, I mean, probably about, like, I guess there's like 3 use cases for this, right? Maybe 4, like, there's a fringe 4th use case, I suppose. So, use case number 1, your opponent is at 3 life. Throw this at their face, win the game. Pretty straightforward. Not exactly the best rate. 4 mana for 3 damage is like not a good rate at all. But if it gets the job done, it gets the job done. Second use case, your opponent has an X3 or smaller and you want to get rid of it. Kill it with this spell. Also pretty straightforward, pretty vanilla, pretty reasonable. Third use case, you have your own creature. It's larger than an X3. It's like an X5 or an X4. Target your own creature with this after they haven't blocked, and then you get to deal an extra 5 damage to them. So it actually deals more damage if you target an unblocked creature with it that won't die to the 3 damage. So you can use it as like a really weird pump spell, which is kind of cool. And then the final use case is somehow you have a spell that only allows you to kill creatures with a certain power or greater, and the creature card at the time doesn't have the right amount of power to meet that criteria, and then you use this to grow it and then kill it with the other spell, but that doesn't sound very good. You're probably not going to want to do that. But the first 3 use cases I said are good. Kill a creature straight up, kill an opponent straight up, or deal an opponent way more damage out of nowhere by using it as a pump spell after they declare no blocks. Or to trade with another creature if you want. But then you're like 2 for 1-ing yourself, which is worse. Neat card. I don't know how good it is, but it's neat, and I'll be curious to see how it plays out in Limited. Alright, Quakebringer. This is our red Foretell card, our red Foretell mythic for the set. So for 5 mana, it's a 5/4, and it has your opponents can't gain life. Notably, you still can. I don't know how you're doing that specifically, but you still can. At the beginning of your upkeep, Quakebringer deals 2 damage to each opponent. This ability triggers only if it itself is on the battlefield, or if Quakebringer is in your graveyard and you control a giant. So this actually, if this card dies, but you still have another random giant in play, it'll still keep pinging your opponent for 2 damage, which is like kind of cool. And if it's in play, then it'll keep doing that. Meanwhile, you have a 5/4, and it foretells for 4. This is, again, a windmill slam every time you're playing red in Limited. If it's in your sealed pool, play it, assuming your pool can support playing red. If you see it in draft, pick it. Probably first pick it. Depending on what your deck looks like, this is probably good enough that I would consider pivoting into red. Assuming you're not like completely train wrecking yourself to do so. And then I think in EDH, again, you'll play it if you're playing Giant Tribal, but probably not otherwise, and similar in Brawl. This is another one of those cards where it's like, it's very good, but it is specifically good in Giant Tribal. So, your mileage may vary. Alright, Reckless Crew, 4 mana sorcery, create X 2/1 Red Dwarf Berserker creature tokens, where X is the number of vehicles you control plus the number of equipment you control. For each of those tokens, you may attach an equipment you control to it. So basically, oftentimes, I actually think this card is quite good, because oftentimes you'll find yourself in EDH in a situation where you have a bunch of equipment, but people keep killing all your shit, and so you just have a bunch of equipment lying around just begging for something to get on it. But you can't do that. This actually lets you basically get as many creatures as you have equipments plus vehicles, and then auto-equip equipments to each of those creatures, so that you can start getting in. Now, they don't have haste, which means if everyone has another Wrath, you're probably still shit out of luck. But it's a really cool card, and it's a good way to gas back up in the kind of deck that sometimes gets really stymied by a Wrath effect. So I kind of like that. Alright, Run Amok. This is just a reprint. Combat Trick. It's honestly not bad. 2 mana for +3/+3 and Trample is going to beat a lot of stuff in combat and get some damage through. If you're playing a red aggressive deck, I honestly strongly advocate playing a copy of Run Amok. It's a better combat trick than you would think it is. And again, as with always, if you're being attacked, just be careful of cards like this, because they can make your good block look real bad real fast. Rune of Speed is our red rune, of course. Draw a card, and then it's the enchantment. In this case, it's +1/+0 and haste. So this one actually does give a power boost in addition to a evergreen ability. I think all the other ones only give the ability. It's not bad. It's not great. It's fine. Seize the Spoils. So 3 mana, and then as an additional cost, you have to discard a card. Then you get to draw 2 cards and then make a treasure token. Which is actually not a bad card, generally speaking. Basically, it is card selection because you're essentially down 2 cards between casting this and discarding the other card, and you get 2 cards. So it's just replacing itself. You're not gaining any cards in the exchange. But it's a good way to just kind of dig deeper into your deck, especially if the card you're pitching is a crappy land that you have no use for, which is often the case in a red deck. It's not bad. It's not incredible, but it's really not bad. Shackles of Treachery, I believe, is here to... I mean, it may have already happened, but yet another card that fully just invalidates the card Threaten and Act of Treason, in that it is literally just Act of Treason with an additional line of text on it. So gain control of target creature until end of turn, untap that creature. Until end of turn, it gains haste, and whenever this creature deals damage, destroy target equipment attached to it. So it's basically just an act of treason, right? Take their thing, smack them with it, they get it back. But if it happened to have a random equipment attached to it, you get the additional bonus of just blowing up that equipment for no additional cost. Which is like not going to happen very often if I were to guess, but not terrible. Like it's free additional text on a card that already exists, so it's just inherently better than the alternative. Smashing Success is a very poorly named card because this card is terrible and you should never play it. Destroy target artifact or land for 4 mana, and if an artifact is destroyed this way, make a token. Don't play this in your deck. Like, I don't care how good the random thing, like how good your opponent's equipment, your artifact is. Like, it's just not worth bringing in a 4 mana smash. It's just not good. Don't play this card. Squash, 5 mana, and it costs 3 less if you control a giant. It's an instant, which is pretty good. Obviously, it can be as cheap as 2 mana to deal 6 damage to a creature or a walker. 5 mana for this effect is like pretty sketchy. If you're really hard up on removal, you're probably still going to play this, but obviously it really shines in a giant deck, so that's what you want to be actually doing. Tybalt's Trickery. This card is weird. This card got a lot of buzz just for being straight up weird. So 2 mana. It says counter target spell. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is a red counter spell. However, it doesn't quite end there. It's not quite that cut and dry. You choose 1, 2, or 3 at random. Your opponent mills that many cards, so whichever number you chose, they mill that many cards, then exiles the cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than the spell. They may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then they put the exiled cards on the bottom of the library in a random order. So basically, you counter the spell that they're casting right now, but the trade-off is that they get a random free spell off the top. So that can be worse, it can be better. It can't be the same spell, because that is specifically not a thing you're allowed to do because of the wording. So you're sort of gambling. It's a little bit like Chaos Warp, but a counterspell in that way. But it also notably gets to hit instants and sorceries in addition to permanents, which Chaos Warp doesn't. It's a pretty cool card. It's a very nifty card. I don't know if it's a good card. People are going to be trying this out. It is a red card that says counterspell. People are not going to be able to help themselves to try to shove this in random red decks. Time will tell if this is good or not. It'll definitely enable a bunch of nonsense and be pretty silly. So that's kind of cool. All right, Tormentor's Helm. I actually think this is a better equipment at common than like any of the random uncommon ones where you get a token. It's 1 mana, 1 red to cast, 1 colorless to equip. Equip creature gets +1/+1, which is like already fine. And then whenever that creature gets blocked, it also deals a damage to them. So if they want to block it and like trade or whatever, they still have to take a damage to do that. I actually think that this is like a good little spell. You need to be aggressive. You don't want to be playing in limited. You need to be aggressive. You don't want to be playing this in your like mid-range deck. But if you're an aggressive deck, you're just trying to get damage in and you want to make your creatures a little bit harder to block. This is not bad, and it's really, really cheap to do all this stuff. Notably, going back to that failed warrior equipment deck from earlier, I will probably put this in that deck because it is just a very good rate for a very reasonable effect on an equipment. Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, Tundra Fumarole. Somebody is shooting off fireworks right now outside. What day is it? It is January 20th. I guess maybe they're American. Maybe this is presidential election related, but like, god damn it. It's a Wednesday night. Why are you doing this? Anyway, Tundra Fumarole, 3 mana snow sorcery. It deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. And then you get to add 1 Wingdings mana for every snow mana you spent to cast a spell. So the spell, you won't get your red mana back, but the spell could technically be free in that if you spent all 3 snow mana to cast this, you'll get 3 non-snow colorless mana after, which you could then use to cast a different spell potentially. So it's a potentially free deal 4, but with a couple of conditions of like, A, it's only colorless mana, and B, only if you spend snow to cast it. Yeah. It's kind of a cool spell. I don't know how good it actually is, especially at sorcery speed, but it is neat. And again, you're always going to play this in your limited deck. Like, Deal 4 is just a solid card for 3 mana, even as a sorcery. Like, it's just a decent removal spell, so you're just always going to play this. Tescari Firewalker is our next card. 3 mana, 3/2. It has Boast, exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn. I actually think this is a solid little card. It's very classic red card advantage, right? You only get to cast the card on a turn, and you already did spend one of your mana here, so you're not going to have access to all your mana this turn. But it's basically rewards you for getting aggressive and allows you to kind of keep the card advantage flowing to a point as long as you're doing that. And then lastly, our final red card is Vault Robber. It is a 2 mana 1/3 with 1 in tap, exile a creature card from your graveyard, and create a treasure token. It's a defensive 2-drop in red, which makes me inclined to believe it's not going to be great. But the ability is decent. It's basically it's like semi-ramping you, and all you need to do is like exile some cards from your yard that you're probably not going to get back anyway, so like the cost is relatively low there. I just don't exactly know what the home for a card like this looks like in Limited. In Brawl, this might actually be okay, and then in Commander, this is just not even close to cutting it. All right. So once again, I'm gonna run an ad break real quick. So don't go anywhere, and I will see you on the other side of that for the green cards.